Good evening, Milwaukee. This is going to be a really wonderful performance, I guarantee you. Put your hands together for the world premiere of Jon Langford's Executioner's Last Songs.
Good evening. Okay, I'm going to introduce the band. On the drums, Massey. On the bass, Maimone. On vocals and reading and funny German accents, Sally Timms.
Thank you.
On visuals and honky-tonk piano, Barry Mills from Atlanta, Georgia. On the violin, Gene Cook from Brooklyn. Here's a song you won't be hearing on country radio. To walk away from you, I wanted to do what was right, but even more, I wanted to hold you, stay with you all through the night.
I thought I knew our love came true on the day that I said I do. For better or worse, now seems like a curse, 'cause I didn't see that too. The plans we made will bring us together, as together we'll walk down the aisle one day. We'll fix our mistakes and we'll have forever
If we follow the plans we have made. My love for you was born in a moment, the moment I looked in your eyes. Now each passing day I plan for the moment when I can break free of these ties.
They say that love can seem like a lifetime away from the one that you love. This life that I'm living is just like a present, and I can't get out soon enough. The plans we made will bring us together, as together we'll walk down the aisle one day. We'll fix our mistakes and we'll have forever
If we follow the plans we have made. The woman I married now lies there sleeping, peaceful in dreams where she lay. I sit down beside her, pull out my pistol, kiss her and blow her away.
My hands were shaking and my heart was racing as I stood there and watched him expire. The cold-blooded chill was mixed with the thrill of freedom and restless desire.
The rain on the windshield, the air through the window, the sounds of escape as we drive through the night. And off in the distance, the silence is shattered in the wail of a siren and flashing with lights. The plans we made have brought us together, as together we'll walk down the aisles to our grave. eternity bound with a lethal injection. It's the price for the plans that we made. My story tonight will be something about toughing it out at the bottom of the heap, surviving in exile, thrills, spills, shaking hips, and the crushing weight of compromise on a sorry career in the punk rock trenches, and a few blinding moments when it all made sense. It will be interspersed with cautionary parables for those who feel compelled to express themselves through word and tune, yet do not at first recognize the rising tide of dung they're willingly wading into. I'll present an unnecessarily multi-layered and complex anecdotal description of my experiences burrowing on the fringes of rock and roll and my half-cocked resistance to the strange magnetic pull of the beast itself, with its excess and incompetence, dodgy deals, breathless lies, lavish dinners that can leave tortured art schoolers and self-taught cowboy musicians morphed limply into hopeless corporate employees. It'll be a tell-all, show-some, incompleteness carnival of bluster, blather, greed and self-delusion that will hopefully consume you, the audience, in great tides of pity and regard for the tireless and impoverished entertainer who, having signed up for the long haul, is prepared to die with the reins in his hands. You can be the last one standing as the surface of the earth melts like a chocolate bar. Throw me out with the garbage, I'll never get that far. Bury me in the streets, scatter me like beads of mercury. Have me stuffed just like trigger, pickled for a souvenir. My pain is peeling, my nails are rust. At the peak of my popularity, I'm crumbling into dust. It's not enough. It's not enough. It's not enough. It's not enough. Well, I'm entertaining, I'm mesmerizing, collapsing as we speak. I left my clothes on, neatly folded. Now I'm headed on up the creek, past the University of Boredom, the shrunken head bar and grill, the Death Wish Casino, the Paradise Garden Sale, on the deck of the wreck of the Maddie Celeste, where rock and roll came to die. I still be trying to change the channels as my life goes flashing by. It's not enough. It's not enough. It's not enough. It's not enough. Oh, Jesus. My pain is peeling, my nails are rust. At the peak of my popularity, I'm crumbling into dust. It's not enough. 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 I reached my teenage years during the early 70s, that ultimate twilight of cool. A wannabe soccer hooligan in a South Wales seaport town, hopelessly devoted to my local team, Newport County, and their endless travails at the very bottom of the 4th Division. The fact that they weren't much good and were frowned upon by my macho, Welsh-speaking, rugby-loving uncles only increased the attraction. Soccer in the lower ranks was not about big money and success. It was about the lack of it and getting by against the odds and somehow, sometimes, scoring that one amazing, heroic victory. But more often as not. Blind with optimism, we'd be back again next Saturday, waiting around for something to change. It was as accurate and poignant a representation of the working class experience as any poet, folkie or painter could ever muster up, playing itself out relentlessly in the pissing rain and wind, week after week, a clumsy backbeat to the choking routine of daily life. Mostly we ate chips, drank pop and shouted sarcastic abuse at our own players. Competing in this with the other gaggles of sorry local youth scattered sparsely across the rotting wooden railway sleeper terraces of Somerton Park. Surreal chanting was big. Give me a G!
G!
Give me a T!
C!
Give me an R!
R!
Give me an R!
R!
Give me a P!
P!
Give me an O!
O!
Give me an R!
R!
What have you got? It was all about Feather Cut, Doc Martens, Clockwork Orange, Bowie, Roxy, T-Rex and Slade. Most of the kids I knew who went to the footy back then turned into punk rockers at the same time as me. We left town, got into bands and followed our noses down new roads to nowhere, unconsciously carrying something of Newport County with us. Wherever you wander, wherever you will be, up there in the Rhondda, or down here by the sea, we're calling you home. We're calling you home. And this time, it's to stay. Just waiting to happen. The equation's the same, and the rules are as dirty. Though everything's changed, I see it all. You're still so small, and disasters will take new names.
Letter to Sophie Bourbon from her daughter, Anne Bourbon Levinsky, April 18th, 1983. Dear Mom, thanks for your letter. How are things with you? Glad you liked the tape I sent you. In answer to your question, the Mekons are some sort of weird English punk band that couldn't play their instruments but made these weird homemade records on totally obscure labels. Terry said they never split up and sometimes they still put records out. He saw them in New York at New Year's and they were really drunk and climbed on each other's shoulders and stuff. Are you sure you want more? I'll bring it at Easter if you want. Call Dad, he's going out of town then, I think. Maybe I'll stay in Chicago for a few weeks. I'm kind of bored. Miss you. Give my love to Bobby. Love, Annie.
The old salty sea biscuit in the wind.
The wind it blows hard and the wind it blows free. Many's the time it's been blowing out of me. Many's the time I've sailed the seven seas with the old roaring 40s behind me.
The end.
No regrets, I'm not ashamed. A man will do many things for a career in the entertainment business. And this, according to Sally Timms, was my finest hour. The old salty sea biscuit. Arr.
Possibly.
Possibly. He'll be my conscience tonight. My nautical and scatological alter ego appeared briefly on a kids' TV show that was directed by Barry B. over here, hosted by a puppet and a goat, and finally scrapped when the powers that be actually bothered to watch it and saw how insane it really was.
Culturally speaking, the Mekons always embrace the highbrow and the lowbrow but spurn the middle, quoting Benjamin and Marcuse while dressing up like pirates full of beer and fart jokes.
So middlebrow culture is of course our enemy, a place where nothing ever happens. It's the American mainstream's natural habitat, an open prison where the landlords and the legislators would have us serve out our time. But the low and the high balance each other out. So if I get too cozy or self-righteous up here at the podium, Bally's going to drop in another clip of me reading crap poems in his bathroom sink with a parrot on my shoulder, just to demonstrate that I'm not worthy of taxidermy or the glass case just yet. Well, I was born in '57, somewhere in the heavens, a Sputnik started beeping night and day. A shiny little ball that could never ever fall, floating slow by the window where I lay. I went out there on the launch pads, up there with the Sputnik. I stayed up all night when the men walked on the moon. I was born in the trail of the rocket's fiery tail. I saw the brighter future coming soon, where the winners of the human race were floating weightless up in space, above the poor and the heavy and the doomed. It's one small step for man, a giant leap from Vietnam. Up there when the men walked on the moon. I went up there on the launch pads, up there with the Sputnik. I stayed up all night when the men walked on the moon. Yeah, I was born in the trail of the rocket's fiery tail. I saw the bright future coming soon. For years, I didn't paint at all. A painter needs a subject, and for a long time I didn't have one. Maybe that's not quite always true, but it'll do for my current purpose. When I went to university to study fine art in the autumn of 1976, I was 18 and charmingly provincial and prone to sudden bowel movements. But to misquote Ernest Tubb, you better just remember to smile when you call me provincial. Straight out of high school via the cluttered back bedroom of my parents' house, I arrived in Leeds just in time for punk. Even as I sat in my dad's Volvo heading north up the M6, the Sunday tabloid headlines screamed, "Outrage and horror!" A band called the Sex Pistols had just broken the tea time fuck barrier on some local London TV show. Horror and outrage. Suddenly punk, like some great scabby-legged buzzard, came soaring over the drab British horizon to fix us all with its crazy, polarizing stare. In a country with only 3 TV channels, one of which just showed a potter's wheel going round and round and round and round, punk became instantly inescapable for both the kids on the street and their parents back indoors. The former, with pants aflame, commenced spitting and hopping up and down on the spot to sever all ties with the past and fumble ungratefully for control of their own culture and entertainment, while the latter, sniffing Armageddon in every Oxfam shirt and safety pin, kicked their 9-inch black and white steam-powered TV sets around the living room floor. All Sex Pistols guitarist Steve Jones had said was, "What a fucking rotter." But oh yes, I knew right then how I'd be spending the next 27 years of my life. Me and my mate Tom immediately ceased nailing apples to the art room wall to watch them rot, setting our boots on fire with dangerous flammable materials, or showing up at our painting studios at all. As a kid in Wales, I painted happy, sloppy landscapes of yellow sunlight dancing through the leaves of bluish-green trees out on the lush private golf course near the Severn Bridge, waiting for my dad and uncle to finish up their Sunday afternoon round of golf and sneak me an underage pint. I arrived in Leeds a sub-impressionist hick, well deserving of the kicking I received from my smug modernist tutors, who quickly squeezed all the Monet and Pissarro out of my tubes with their giant rainbow light bulb ladders, terrible beards, monkey boots and indifference. And that was it really. In 1977 we downed brushes and formed the Mekons. Or Tom, Kevin, Cherokee and Corrigan did, and got me to join because I had a drum kit. "We're going to start a band where no one can play. Do you want to be in it?" "Yeah, okay. Yeah, sounds good." It was a joke, a one-liner, the anti-band, a bunch of drunk art students scribbling daft songs about outer space, girls and unemployment on beer mats in the pub. We'd be the first punk band to only play slow songs, but compromised even before our first gig when the promoter told us to play fast or stay home. The accelerated tempos, reducing our set to a cozy 12 minutes. Someone else's gear, someone else's van, but within a year we had a record out, and people were calling us for gigs and interviews. My drafty Leeds 6-bedroom with a sloping pink carpeted floor, I'd record John Peel's show on BBC Radio 1 every night at 10, sticking a portable cassette player up to my transistor radio and running off down to the pub for last call. That was the only show that mattered, and these crude hissing tapes were the Bible. Buzzcocks, Beefheart, Prince Farai, Per Ubu, The Fall, Ivor Cutler, Misty in Roots, all for the first time. 3 tracks from Bob Marley's Choir, a session from Kevin Coyne, The Only Ones, and Althea and Donna's Uptown Top ranking on its way to #1. The day the Mekons' primitive first single, Never Been in a Riot, hit the shops, I came home to find a bunch of housemates hunched over the record player laughing their asses off. I'd imagined something magical would take place during the transfer to vinyl, and we would suddenly sound like a real band on a real record. But no way. The single sounded so raw and extreme that out of sheer embarrassment I began to laugh as well. But somehow, and not for the last time, the Mekons managed to snatch triumph from the jaws of humiliation. A couple of nights later, I'm poised with my finger on the record button when Peel announces he's going to play our single. Bloody hell. There's no one in the house to verify this, and nobody who'll believe me in the pub, so I drag my neighbour Dinah up to the attic as a witness. We sit there doubtful and anxious for the best part of 2 hours, but by midnight I am fully vindicated and in possession of that elusive rock star status and cool that I enjoy to this very day. Thank you, John Peel, for ruining any chance I have a normal life. I'm truly grateful. Why do you play that dog turd music? Asks legendary rock critic Lester Bangs.
It's New Year's Day 1981, less than a month after John Lennon's murder, and the Mekons are at a media punk rock party somewhere on frozen Manhattan. The whole city seems to be nursing a giant, twitchy hangover.
Don't know really, but that's a pretty accurate description, we reply. What? Snarls Lester. You're meant to defend yourselves. Why, it is dog turd music. Lester ponders this for a moment. He's a very big man in a black winter coat and beret with dark rings under his eyes. I've read his stuff in the NME, the manic, older American journo who took punk rock to heart. That's a totally revolutionary concept. A band that doesn't even like itself. He seems genuinely impressed. It turns out that he's been at the Gang of Four Mekons au pair show at Haraz the night before and actually likes our band. The dog turd jibe is a Bangsy and icebreaker, and we don't give a shit because while this is our first US gig ever, it's probably our last anywhere.
The Mekons are at a fairly terminal stage of disintegration, sacked by Virgin Records, bass player run off to join the Venezuelan Symphony, sick of playing last year's flavour to the dwindling gaggles of violent morons who'd annexed the British punk cul-de-sac, sick of each other, skint, unemployable, gone back to art school, etc., etc.
And if New York seems like a long way to come to expire, well, it worked for Sid Vicious. Come round tomorrow, says Lester, and gives us his address above a Chinese restaurant in the West Village. No doorbell, just yell Lester. The next afternoon, perturbed Manhattan diners go up as three underdressed art school punks huddle together on the sidewalk screaming, Lester! Lester! Up at the sky. After a few minutes, a window opens and a pair of stereo speakers are lowered by their wires towards the street below, blaring the two-chord thrash of Never Been in a Riot, our first single. This is more than a little disconcerting, and things get worse when Lester sticks his huge head out and starts shouting along. Hey, listen, this is you! He is swinging the speakers back and forwards, just feet above our heads, as snow spirals down between the tall buildings in big, fluffy clumps.
August 12th, 1984. Dear Mom, I'm taking the day off and vowing not to have any negative thoughts. Wonder how long that's gonna last. So the divorce came through. It's okay, but you also forgot my birthday. I know you've got a lot on your mind. Please don't send any more money to that band. You don't know anything about them, really. They could just be a bunch of losers. Did you talk to them? Whatever makes you happy, I suppose. Anyway, my birthday, we went to a bar, and then we went and got high out in the woods, and found this really creepy old tree, and Tony was chasing me around it with his pants around his ankles in the mud. I laughed till I wet myself. He's nice. He likes Jethro Tull. Socially, We're fairly big losers. If I had more to do, less time to kill, maybe I'd feel less of a loser than I really am. Did you ever see Hendrix? Love Andy.
It wasn't that I'd been entirely absent for art school all those years, I just didn't do any painting. The fine art department was heavy on theory, Marxist, situationist, feminist, etc. It was a talking shop and we talked a lot. Us, the Gang of Four, and nearly everybody else we knew were art students in bands who spent short days and long nights drinking and quarrelling about music and politics, all the while honing and sculpting our huge critical muscles and rigorously sleeping with each other. Whether we were in the Union Bar, the Fenton, or the all-night calf, the rehearsal room, the back of the van, or collapsed in bed for half the day, listening to Graham Parker or The Clash, we talked a fierce game and sneered a good sneer. Though punk now seems like a time of limitless possibilities, we mainly obsessed about what we shouldn't do, and only stumbled on what we should through a process of elimination. At art school, I read little, listened through a hungover haze, missed vital reviews and tutorials, somehow learning the important things that actually stuck with me via osmosis. Of course, it was intimidating and paralyzing for me as a visual artist, but I'm grateful to have been through that ideological mincer, cleansing me as if it did of any interest in the cannibal tedium of much 20th century art theory. If not leading me to what I should do, at least it alerted me to what I shouldn't. The background noise was deafening. I guess something had to rub off. Destroy your safe and happy lives before it is too late. The battles we fought were long and hard, just not to be consumed by rock and roll. Rock and roll. Capitalismos in favor of boy chat. We must apologize, 'cause up in the rafters a rope is dangling, spots before the eyes. Rock and roll. Rock and roll. Going through Checkpoint Charlie into East Berlin in the late 80s, I'm pulled over by a border guard for having some Soviet-style hammer and sickle patch on the arm of my leather jacket.
Where did you get this?
I bought it in a goth store on Hamburg's Reeperbahn some days earlier and had sewn it onto the sleeve of my jacket out of boredom in the van.
That is not possible.
Oh yes it is. They sell this stuff all over Western Europe, even in Leeds. There's much shaking of heads and pointing, but we finally let through. We soon found out about the only place you can't buy cool commie paraphernalia is in the East. Fur coats, perfume, watches, no problem, as long as you've got Western currency to pay for them. But all we've got is a pile of East German marks smuggled in down somebody's knickers, and there's nothing here to spend it on. Hey, we're from the West, products of capitalism, raised on rock and roll. Born inside the belly, we demand the right to purchase choice Stalinist nuggets, the souvenir bric-a-brac of your crumbling sector in exchange for this toy money. Come back in a few years, and you can buy a chunk of the wall, slurp Miller Lite, and watch MTV at TGI Fridays in Karl Marx Platz, with your previously owned Red Army tank parked outside, stuffed to the brim with contraband plutonium. And the same border guard will say,
Do you want fries with that?
Herbert Marcuse said that whatever you throw at capitalism, it'll just throw it back, right back at you. It'll sell it right back to you. The music business is capitalism's muscular right arm with a big fat catcher's mitt on the end. For a while, punk rock was too hot to handle, a brief formative moment of opportunity and danger, before the major labels donned their oven gloves, held their noses, and swallowed it whole. When the Clash signed to CBS, some odious little PR drone came up with a marketing slogan, "The only band that matters," just to rub corporate salt into communal wounds. It was in papers and on posters all over the States. We signed to Virgin Records in 1979 and thought we could climb into the dragon's mouth and piss out the flames. But we learned. We learned the only band that matters is the one that makes the dosh. Punk rock is reduced to Malcolm McLaren's pointless swindle, and that's reassuring for the industry. We all want the same thing. By the mid-80s, rock and roll has grown up and gotten a job on the board of directors. The myth of a social conscience saw pop stars posturing to reflate limp careers and conceal a hunger that feeds on the world, thinks globally and acts locally to screw everybody. Wednesday, February the 12th, 1997. Satellites beam U2's press conference all over the globe. It doesn't matter if you're from the lingerie department of Kmart, the laundry room at Trump Towers, or from up a dead bear's ass. The irony is transparent. The meaning is plain. The ignition engaged. The engine turns over. I can't hear you, Bono. My ears are full of shit. East Berlin, you can't buy a thing. There's nothing they can sell me. I walk through the wall, there's no pain at all. I'm born inside the belly of rock and roll. Rock and roll. Something to sound your neighbor for. When hair sprouts up in low. On a microscope on that secret place where we all wanna go. It's rock and roll. Rock and roll.
Everybody in the dance need a selfie burn in October 27th, 1989. It was just a horrible noise and shouting, and now they're on A&M? Sting's label? Maybe they can give you back your money back, now that they're pop stars.
Learning nothing from our own history, we signed with A&M in 1989 and made a concept album called The Mekon's Rock and Roll. It was an attempt to destroy the music industry from within while simultaneously charting our own demoralized capitulation. No one there had a clue what we were on about. I never met my new employer, but one day at the A&M offices on the old Hollywood lot where Charlie Chaplin made The Great Dictator, the boss's personal secretary forged his signature on a CD for my mother.
Dear Mrs. Langford, you have a fine and talented son, Herb Alpert.
The secret of the Mekon's success was our lack of success, confounding expectations while having none of our own. And as our first 15-year van ride puttered out, I woke up bruised and penniless in a one-bedroom apartment in Chicago's Bucktown, finally disillusioned and isolated enough to consider painting again. But what should I paint? Over the years, I picked up some ideas about how art was no solitary activity removed from the world, how you had to be able to talk and explain and justify your work, how it was work, how it should be about your immediate situation and politics and your place in the food chain and relationship to the powers that be. And really, it was never a problem for the Mekons to write songs about all those things after the music biz crap we dealt with day in and day out for years. So what was the big difference between a song and a painting? Or even a gig in an art show? Or as I was to find out later, a big label and a big gallery. Obviously all my fine art insider baggage couldn't just be ditched out of some desire to make pretty pictures. I'd have to step around it, poke it with a long pointy stick, and find out exactly which bits were crippling me. But maybe a painting could be like a song. Maybe there is no difference.
The myth of expertise. Letter from Bob Will's attorney David Randolph Milston to Saul H. Bernstein of Irving Berlin Incorporated Music Publishers on July 16, 1940, regarding changes the firm had made in both the music and lyrics of Will's song San Antonio Rose in an attempt to popularize it. Dear Mr. Bernstein, Mr. Wills did not contemplate such a radical change in the tune as has been made. According to Mr. Wills, the original tune has been abandoned, and the song has been revised so that now all that is heard when playing the piano score is harmony to the original melody. You have so changed the words and the tune that the patrons and fans of Mr. Wills will no longer accept the song. Mr. Wills now almost continually has embarrassing moments when the orchestra plays the song as published because his patrons refuse to dance to the tune and call for the original to be played and the original words to be sung. In November 1969, people all over the planet heard San Antonio Rose sung in its original form by astronauts Charles Conrad and Al Bean on their way to the moon.
In Leeds, we never heard Bob Wills. Merle Haggard, George Jones, Patsy Cline, Ernest Tubb, Kitty Wells and Buck Owens. We got Boxcar Willie instead. The mystery and misery of real hard country music only filtered into our strangely parallel punk rock universe through some cassette tapes we got from an American college DJ in 1983.
The Mekons were currently languishing in post-punk hibernation, not making records or playing live, but far too lazy to actually split up. Some key members had quit the band after they were dropped by Virgin Records, but there was still a little hardcore that sat in the pub every night, plotting revenge on a world that was resolutely not interested. At home in Chicago, WZRD DJ Terry Nelson's favourite bands were the Mekons and the Pretty Things, and through a chance encounter with the Gang of Four's road crew, he set off for London to exhume them both.
He had this idea that the Mekons were a country band, because while proper punk bands ranted on about bondage and smashing the system, our simple clattering dirges mostly dealt with failed sexual relationships and drinking in bars. To illustrate this theory, Terry handed us a compilation cassette of drinking and cheating songs called Honky Tonk Classics Volume 1. And although the country punk connection seemed a bit of a stretch, we were hooked nonetheless. It was a total eye-opener. Confirmation of something dark, sinewy and uncomfortable lurking beneath all that Nashville easy listening. At my first rock concerts in the mid-70s, rich and removed prog rock bands on vast pantomime stage sets oppressed me with their technical virtuosity and dreadful songs about elves and wizards. We saw punk as the antidote, cheap, sweaty, local fun with no barriers between a band and its audience. Sadly, Mekons attempts to bridge that gap by inviting the audience on stage to play our instruments, usually degenerated into a Saturday morning guitar shop wanking session. Sarah. But the tunes on Terry's hard country cassette lived up to our punk rock goals effortlessly. These honky-tonk guys knew their crowd because they lived in the same world as them, confronting the same realities head-on every day with the same defiant humor and fatalism.
I do need my ukulele now. There you go. Now I can subject the Simpsons to some really terrible playing.
If drinking don't kill me, your memory will. I can't go on much longer the way that I feel, with the blood from my body. I could start my own still. And if drinking don't kill me, your memory will.
She made that out of matchsticks in prison as well, so it's a wonderful instrument.
With my teeth.
Corny as it seems, these stripped-down honky-tonk tales of lust and loneliness, sex, drinking and death struck a chord with us, usually E major, and connected our alienated, drunk commie souls to a strident tradition we hardly knew existed.
In 1987, on the Mekons' second tour of the United States, decked out in big hats, pearl buttons, black embroidered western shirts, pointy boots and collar tips,
The cool civilian uniform that presents outsiders with a direct line to the core of the American cowboy myth.
we stumble into the Double R Ranch, a subterranean honky-tonk deep beneath the shiny skyscrapers of Chicago's Loop.
Up on the stage, Below wall-mounted longhorns and cowhide maps of Texas, a band of old guys called the Sundowners are halfway through some grueling all-night set. Their lovely, rasping western harmonies guiding a crew of sozzled city folk down the long trail to dawn. Looks like we got a band here, says singer Bob Boyd, inviting us up to play a few numbers. That's such a good idea. Well, 2 or 3 sundowners dug into the shadows and hit the bar, grateful and desperate for a break. Guitarist Don Wall stays and plays with us, his beautiful, fluid guitar lines acting like a powerful glue that holds us together and passes our ragging off as something the regulars can tolerate. He smiles encouragingly and does not seem alarmed by how crap we are. Maybe he recognizes some kindred spirit, or maybe we're all just smashed. Who cares? In a hard city a million miles from the country, we're all exiles trying to keep our feet out of the corporate dog shit and forget all the divisions and injustices and casual brutalities that make this place so terrifying.
10 years ago, on a cold dark night, there was someone killed neath the town hall lights. There were few at the scene, but they all agreed that the slain ran looked a lot like me. The judge said, "Son, what's your alibi? If you were somewhere else, then you won't have to die." I spoke my word, though it meant my life, for I have been in the arms of my best friend's wife. She walks these hills in a long black veil. She visits my grave when the night winds wail. Nobody knows, nobody sees, nobody knows but me. The scaffold was high and eternity near. She stood in the crowd and shed not a tear. But sometimes at night, when the cold wind moans in a long black veil, she cries on my bones. She walks these hills in a long black veil. She visits my grave when the night winds wail. Nobody knows, nobody sees, nobody knows but me. Nobody knows but me. Nobody knows but me.
When bassist Kurt Delaney of the Sundowners got home in the early hours, he woke up his wife and said, "Honey, you won't believe what blew in tonight." There'll be a short intermission. We'll be back in 5, maybe 6 drinks time.